Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Susan Zaretsky. I'm from the university's Office of Global Engagement. I'll be your MC today. Before we begin the proceedings, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It is upon their ancestral lands that the University of Sydney is built. As we share our knowledge, teaching, learning, and research practices within this university, may we pay respect to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodian of the country. I would like to thank Sydney Knowledge Hub for providing this lovely venue for the seminar and for the continued support for our collaboration with Hong Kong. I also like to thank Investor Hong Kong, the Hong Kong SAR government department responsible for attracting and facilitating foreign direct investment in Hong Kong, for this opportunity to hear from the Director General on the latest development in Hong Kong's initiative to enhance international R&D collaboration. Investor Hong Kong has been a valuable ally for our university. Ian Roberts especially has been working with us in promoting our university's expertise to Hong Kong and running information sessions on research grants and fundings available from the Hong Kong government for joint research projects with overseas research institutes. Director General, your visit today is timely after two webinars that we co-hosted with Investor Hong Kong and the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. So next, I would like to invite Dr. Luca De Leonardis, the head of Investor Hong Kong in Australia and New Zealand, to say a few words. Thank you, Luca.
Thank you very much, Susan. Thank you for having us today. Thank you for attending remotely and here with us. So it's going to be a very interesting session today. Please, after the session, don't hesitate to contact our office. We are based here in Sydney, myself and my colleague, Ian Roberts. Please, for any further information, contacts, anything you need after this presentation today, please contact our office. And most importantly, I would like to thank the University of Sydney for organizing, for arranging this event today. And thank you once again. Enjoy, and I really hope we can have a chat with you again for your future engagement with Hong Kong. Thank you very much.
Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Stephen Phillips, the Director General of Investment Promotion at Investor Hong Kong. He's our guest speaker today. Mr. Phillips has served in senior positions in a number of private and public organizations. He lived and worked in Hong Kong from 1989 to 2004, holding senior investment banking positions with Deutsche, Barclay Capital, before co-founding a Hong Kong-based group of companies providing IT, financial and consultancy services across Asia. In 2004, Mr. Phillips joined the UK Trade and Investment, now the UK's Department of International Trade, before becoming the Chief Executive of the China-Britain Business Council in 2006, as well as the Chairman of the EU-China Business Association. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Phillips to give us a presentation.
Well, Susan, thank you very much indeed. And ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It really is a great pleasure to be here at the University of Sydney to share with you perhaps what I would describe as a growth potential. All companies, whether large or small, are always looking for growth opportunities. And over the next 10, 15 minutes or so, I'm going to attempt to share with you what's going on in Hong Kong in the innovation and technology space, from pure research through translation, through to commercialization, and then through to accessing regional markets, whether Hong Kong, China, or more broadly. For the Hong Kong government, the innovation and technology agenda is one of the most important policy areas. And there's three areas in particular where the government is investing a lot, both in the universities and through commercialization. In life sciences, specifically in biotech, but more broadly, in certain medical devices. We've got a rapidly aging population, so some of the common diseases that come with age are becoming more and more of an issue in Hong Kong. AI and robotics is the second major area. Big demands for AI in some of our traditional sectors, financial services, professional services, the healthcare sector, and many, many more. And then the third is working back from the commercial opportunity, really in advanced materials. We're looking to do some reindustrialization in Hong Kong, and because of land constraints, it's got to be very high value added manufacturing, and that really leads back to advanced materials ultimately. So what I'm going to do is talk you through some of the things that are going on. We think Hong Kong offers early stage companies that are looking to grow from here in Australia. All of the ingredients, market opportunities, talent and the management. Obviously the businesses bring the product or the service. Hong Kong's got a great environment to do the risk mitigation. And most of all, we have this very deep supportive policy environment around innovation and tech-related businesses. Of course, Hong Kong, as one of the world's top 3 international financial centres, also has got the fuel that helps companies grow from a capital raising point of view, from angels all the way through to ultimately exit. And we've got some very interesting structures actually at the IPO level, designed either for tech companies or for early stage biotechs to do pre-revenue listings, which is quite unusual globally. All businesses need to find revenue opportunities, and that's really what Hong Kong offers. Hong Kong itself, a mature, sophisticated economy. Think of it actually a little bit like Sydney. It's very similar to any developed economy in the world. But Hong Kong is also part of this region called the Greater Bay Area, which is 11 cities in southern China, which are economically integrating more and more. And the reason that that's important to businesses is that it gives scale. Hong Kong, we have a population of about 7.4 million people, but the Greater Bay Area has got 86 million people. So from a commercial point of view, that gives you a market that's obviously rather larger than here. You know, it's the size of a country like Germany or South Korea in terms of GDP. And probably GBA will be about the 5th or 6th largest economy in its own right by 2030. So if you're thinking about growing a business that you've spun out of the university in a few years' time, I would say this is part of the world that you should at least have on your radar. And if you're not going there, do so because of a conscious decision rather than just missing it. Hong Kong also gives you access to other markets, to the whole of mainland China, but also to the fast-growing markets of ASEAN. From a legal and intellectual property point of view, Hong Kong has got a very similar environment actually to that here in Australia. We have a common law legal system based upon originally the English legal system. We've got world-class intellectual property protection, again, very similar to the environment that you're familiar with here. And also our regulators, whichever space you're in, are also seen to be top tier globally. So from an investor point of view, from an entrepreneur point of view, you have got an overall system that gives you the peace of mind that you want when you're commercializing your valuable asset, you know, your brain power that ends up in the intellectual property. Looking more deeply at the sort of innovation and technology ecosystem in Hong Kong, covering off basic research through R&D, commercialization, and then the sort of growth story on sales and business development. On the university side, we've got 5 of the top 100 universities, and I'm sure many of you will have had some academic collaboration with Hong Kong universities over the years. In addition to the universities, we've got 16 key state laboratories, so from the mainland, also in Hong Kong. We've got branches of CNERC, and also we've got some joint labs with some of the entities under the Chinese Academy of Sciences, some of the most genuinely science-led businesses in the world under CAS. On the R&D side, we've got a whole range of facilities. I know this slide is very busy. I apologize for that, but the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park offers facilities for growth companies, including access to lab space, shared lab space. So a business doesn't need to buy its own kit. It can share the very expensive equipment that is needed to further develop a product. There's a range of different funding schemes that might be available from the Science Park. We have a couple of new programs under a moniker called Inno Hong Kong. And this includes academic collaboration around life sciences and around AI and robotics between 28 universities from around the world that's taking place in Hong Kong, but all with a view to commercializing the outcome of that research. We've then got a number of research institutes in Hong Kong that help early stage companies further sort of tweak their products and service for the marketplace. Product commercialization, we've got the space to allow companies to grow, and ultimately we've got those markets that I mentioned earlier on, the scale of the GBA, for instance. Funding, as I've touched on already, is available at every step of the way. So from seed through the growth stage, and then ultimately through listing. So I'll sort of gloss over that for now, but if you'd like to ask any questions, please do so at the end. And then this message about Greater Bay Area, for any business, you do need scale of market. And that's where we think that GBA is something so attractive to international companies from around the world. So if you're prototyping, Shenzhen, for instance, can do some of the fastest prototyping of a product anywhere in the world, and do it quickly and do it at sensible cost. You've got well-developed supply chains within the region. So if you've got a product that works very well, and you've got the scale of manufacturing, and then finally that market. On the capital side, I've covered this a number of times already. I won't go into detail, but if you're looking to establish an offshoot in Hong Kong, then there can be funding, particularly if you're doing some incremental R&D in Hong Kong from a commercial entity's point of view. And that can include matching funding from VCs. We've just introduced a new government fund setting aside money to co-invest with investors in early stage tech related businesses. So that's very new. It was just announced a couple of weeks ago. But ultimately, there's money at every step of the way as a business grows, all the way through to exit, as I mentioned. The startup ecosystem in Hong Kong is growing very swiftly. What is interesting, what is quite unique about our startup ecosystem is how international it is in nature. So almost a third of co-founders come from outside Hong Kong. And this is very important for international companies that are growing, because you find very useful networks with other international early stage companies, and you can sort of collaborate and piggyback and leverage off each other, perhaps in a way that is more difficult to do if you don't have Chinese language skill sets. We've got three very distinct segments, actually: international, local, and mainland invested startups. At the moment, they don't all fully integrate as well as they could, in all honesty. The startup ecosystem is rather skewed towards fintech, not surprisingly given our role as an international financial center. But some of the fastest growing areas are really around life sciences and AI. And that is, I think, where the future is going to lie. I think also cross-cutting wise solutions to address climate change, the net zero agenda becoming more and more and more important. Hong Kong and actually the Greater Bay Area is quite at risk from climate change because of sea levels. Quite a lot of land could be encroached with rising sea levels. So it's a contemporary issue that we all face. This is at the end of the journey. Many entrepreneurs aspire to become a unicorn, but many entrepreneurs today aspire actually more to make a difference. It isn't necessarily about the money. It's about making a real difference to people, whether it's their health or whether it's society as a whole or net zero. So I wouldn't say that everybody in Hong Kong is just fixated on making big bucks. That's far from the case. Purpose-driven is more and more what we see in the startup ecosystem. Invest Hong Kong, Luca touched on it. We've got a team here in Sydney, and they'd love to have a chat at any time, you know, next week, next month, next year, 2 years down the track. We know it's a long journey for a company that is going through commercialization and then that wants to take a step to going to international markets. But if we can help, we would love to do so at any point in time. Lastly, just a few words about opportunities for individuals in Hong Kong. Because of the innovation and technology agenda, we also are looking for high quality talent from around the world that maybe want to broaden their life experiences. And we've got a dedicated team at Invest Hong Kong that helps individuals capture those sort of opportunities. The opportunities can be in academia, and there's certain grant funding that might be available to help, as well as in commercial roles. But if you'd like to have a chat about that, that's another area where we can provide a little bit of support. So if I can help or the team can help, Luca and Yin are here, we'd love to do so at any point. I'll leave it there for now, but thank you very much indeed.
Hi, Stephen. A lot of the university startups are really, really early stage. And you know, what timing should they should approach Invest Hong Kong, or what do you think it's a good stage where they should think about moving to Hong Kong?
Yeah, it's a good question, and having done a startup myself, it was certainly one of my own personal learnings. There's a temptation, I think, that you chase every hare that you see running because you want to generate revenue. My advice to an early stage entrepreneur is try and remain focused and disciplined. But in that process, you've got to think about growth. You know, if you're going to achieve your growth, where will it be? Will it be at home? Will it be New Zealand? Will you look to the US? Will you look to Europe or to Asia? So beginning to factor that into your thinking is quite important. And part of the reason why is that relates to who do you choose perhaps as your next stage of investors? Do you go with Asian investors, or do you go with Israelis or with US? Because your investors will also shape the direction in which the business may go. So you need to be thinking about these issues at a relatively early stage. Because if your passion is solving a problem in developing Asia, and you've got investors from somewhere in Europe, they might pull you in a very different direction. So it's back to your own values and the purpose for which you're setting up the business. Also, I'd just add that some of the businesses that we work with are spin outs, commercialize very rapidly and go international very rapidly. And for some businesses, that's really important because being first to market or early to market is crucial. Others, the life cycle is much, much longer. So there's no one size fits all. But we'd be happy to talk through with an entrepreneur what we think might be optimal if it is thinking about Asia.
Oftentimes, your first next market, a startup's first next market is going to be based on relationships that they have.
Yeah.
Is that something your team can help with introductions and, potentially the regulatory environment and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. That's part and parcel of our role as Invest Hong Kong. So it could be with investors, making some introductions. It could be with potential customers, making those introductions. Or if you're in a regulated sector, helping you navigate the process. So if you're in life sciences, in biotech, then clinical trials and any processes or recognition of trials from elsewhere. So all of those are issues that we hold companies' hands with on that journey. And again, the earlier you start that, the better in many cases, particularly on regulation, because regulation actually can be a critical path to revenue generation. And if you don't start that process early enough, you're ready to go to market, but you actually don't have the right approvals.
Thanks very much for that, Stephen. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about talent availability, particularly for scaling startups. What does that landscape look like in Hong Kong?
It really varies sector by sector. The main pinch points are really around data scientists at the moment. And more generally in the IT space, where I think almost every sector of the economy is looking for that type of talent. In other areas, I think we're better catered for. When COVID becomes less of an issue in terms of the free movement of people into Hong Kong and from the mainland into Hong Kong, some of those pressure points will be released because of the availability of talent supply from the mainland. But the reason that we have a talent attraction globally is because in certain sectors, we are looking for international talent to add to the talent pool. So it's quite hard to answer the question in generic senses, but it's mostly around computer engineering really at the moment. But obviously, if another sector suddenly starts to boom, like everywhere else, you end up with pinch points. And the sort of data scientists, computer engineering is not unique to Hong Kong. I think it's a global problem, actually. Right.
Hi, if you join us online, you're more than welcome to ask questions as well. And we are 2 questions. Use the chat function, I've been told. So please feel free to use the chat function if you have questions. Thanks. So I've read one of your recent articles online. I've done my homework, as you can tell. In the article, you mentioned 50% of the overseas startups that have set up in Hong Kong went to Hong Kong because they are actually interested in the Greater Bay Area, so not just Hong Kong. And I think the Greater Bay Area also offers a lot of opportunities for our researchers and startups. How can we work with Invest Hong Kong to capture those commercial opportunities? Thanks.
Well, glad that somebody reads some of the stuff that I write. So thank you, Susan. It is very true that almost all of the companies that we work with are interested in China more generally, probably be about 90%. But as you said, 50% of the early stage companies have got GBA very much on their radar. What is complex about GBA is actually you have got 3 legal systems. You've got Hong Kong, Macau, and mainland China. Consequently, you've got 3 different currencies, you've got 3 different sets of regulations and standards and so forth, which becomes quite challenging for smaller companies that have limited resources. So what we've done at Invest Hong Kong, we set up a dedicated Greater Bay Area team in Hong Kong, focus on all the sectors that we work in, again, to help navigate companies through those issues. We're also doing something quite groundbreaking in collaboration with the other 10 cities in GBA, so Macau and the 9 cities in Guangdong, where we've set up a group where we're going to collaborate at the inward investment level. So let's say it was a life sciences company or biotech from Sydney looking to grow into Asia. Ultimately, we hope to be able to say, you can do A, B, C in Hong Kong. That might be incremental R&D suitable for ethnic Chinese population. It could be your sales and marketing function, your finance function, capital raising, general management. But you need a manufacturing facility. Zhongshan might be the sensible place. They've got a biotech park, they've got the scale and the land availability. And we would be offering a single proposition to a company for the total solution that they need. And then we would help navigate them through all of the complexities of that. So we know what the challenge is, and we're trying to find ways to solve that challenge to seize the opportunity. The opportunity is much bigger than the challenge, but to get to that big opportunity isn't as straightforward as just going into a single jurisdiction.
So I can see in one of the slides that a lot of the industry is still concentrated on fintech. And are there any sort of other areas that you think there's potential growth or other sectors that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think biotech is probably the highest potential sector. With around that, some parts in pharma, some parts in devices, some parts perhaps in other therapies. But at the biotech level, we see huge interest from mainland related biotechs using Hong Kong to internationalize, raise capital, go to the rest of the world. And we see incredibly high levels of interest of biotechs out of the US, out of Canada, out of Europe, Israel, using Hong Kong to then enter Asian markets, normally with a focus on the mainland. And I think we've got all of the ingredients in Hong Kong to do further R&D, particularly for Chinese DNA. We've got the universities, we've got the talent, and then the international nature of Hong Kong, and then the capital raising. This pre-revenue listing for biotechs is something that is really, particularly out of the US, capturing growth companies' imagination. I think probably from a couple of comments that I've made, you can probably hear some of the media reporting, let's say, on everything being difficult and so forth. At the commercial level isn't quite the reality of what I see day to day. Businesses just get on with doing what businesses do. There's a disconnect between media reporting and some of the political rhetoric and the reality of what I see.
I wondered whether you might like to make any comment about the university sector, higher ed sector in Hong Kong, given that they are a significant part of innovation and research and have international links. My impression talking to colleagues in Hong Kong is that in many cases they are seeking new staff and not finding it very easy at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think part of it is due to the COVID-related policies that we've had in Hong Kong, which are on at last or now a gradual road to relaxation. But it would be fair to say for a lot of international talent that the restrictive policies, particularly for those that had children, was not attractive, and they couldn't jump on a plane to go and see elderly relatives and so forth. So we have, and it's in the data and the government recognises it, seen quite a lot of talent leaving Hong Kong. I think with the direction of travel very clear on opening up internationally, once there's no actual quarantine requirement, I think we'll begin to see talent returning. It might be different talent, but I think from the work that we're doing on talent attraction, we know that there's lots of latent interest out there, and that includes in the university space. And for certain senior research posts, there's actually quite significant funding that might be available via the university for academics in particular fields. But it's a real issue today, but I think it's one that will, within the next 12 months, begin to resolve itself.
Relations are now down to 3 days. Is that? Yeah.
Yes, we're at what we call 3+4. So 3 days in a hotel, then 4 days of self-medical monitoring, and then into the community. And that's from 21 days for those that don't know. So it's a big difference. If you live in Hong Kong, it's a big difference. Okay, well, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody, whether you're online or here in the room. As I said, if we can help at any point in time, we know the journey can be a long, it can be an iterative one, but we'd be keen to have a chat, and feel free to use us just as a sounding board as you think about taking a business that you're commercializing ultimately international. So thank you very much indeed.